Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Federico Talks Watches. Today, I wanted to talk about something that I found kind of interesting, and that is iconic watches throughout time, particularly the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. What I think are the iconic timepieces of the era, at least in my mind, and I'm aware this is going to be different for everybody. And I'm curious to know what you guys find to be the iconic timepieces of that time period. Of course, before we get started, customary wristwatch check. I am wearing the Rolex GMT Master 2 Pepsi, a watch that I recently rebought for myself, a real grail of mine. And actually, if you guys like it too, we do have one available at delraywatch.com, so go check it out. Link in the description below. So yeah, guys, everybody knows with the times, fashion changes. The 80s, all about extravagance, ladies with shoulder pads, and Chelsea boots. The 90s, kind of weird. Baggy clothes, rapper culture, heroin chic came into fashion. And then the 2000s, which were, just about 10 years ago, are pretty close to what we have today. What are the iconic watches for these time periods, at least in my mind? And were they good or were they bad? In the 80s, I'm going to start off with one that I immediately think of when I think of 80s, and that is the two-tone Cartier Santos, the watch worn by Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas, in Wall Street. What can we say? Exposed screws, Cartier design, a little bit of flash with that gold. Still small, a small timepiece by today's standards, so, kind of a habit of that time, but definitely a watch that was bold and shouted that I am here. And actually, I've noticed I'm going to make a few cinematic references, especially in the 80s, and the next one is going to be the two-tone Rolex Datejust, worn by Christian Bale in American Psycho. Champagne dial, Jubilee bracelet. Is there anything more ridiculously 80s than a champagne dial, Jubilee bracelet, 36mm Datejust? I don't know. But they kind of show you the era of excess, how gold was king, and these watches did get a little bit of a douchey reputation, particularly in the 90s, and now, though, they're definitely making a comeback. In the 90s, things definitely changed, and things calmed down, they became more subdued. For me, the first one is going to be a pre-ceramic Rolex Submariner, 16610. What can we say? An icon, stainless steel, no more gold, slightly bigger size, 40 millimeters. It could be argued that the sub is still, of course it's still an icon, but it could be argued that it's an icon of the 2000s, but in the 90s is definitely when I started to see them out and about. But that might just be a result of my age. Another watch of the 90s is probably one of the ugliest watches ever made. That is the Tag Heuer Link. Guys, I'm not saying I like the Link, I'm just saying it's iconic. I think it's hideous, I think it's gross, and I would never wear one, but I definitely associate it as one of the icons of the 90s. Tag Heuer tried to reboot this for the 2000s. Thank God it did not work. If you guys like the Link, hey, no big deal. Personally, no thanks. And now the 2000s, and this is the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2010 roughly. And I know this is going to get a little bit of hate, but if you think about it, it's definitely true. Panerai 111, the decade of the 44 plus millimeter watch. Panerai exploded onto the scene, going from $1,500 watches to sprouting its own forum and having a collector market, which is comparable to Patek Philippe today. Now, yes, that did not last, and the Panerai market is now soft. However, in the 2000s, Panerai 111, the base model Panerai, was king. Everybody thought it was hot shit, everybody wanted it, and I was selling them at Wempy. I was throwing them out the door. I didn't have enough stock, and Panerai was definitely king. And now we get into something which is arguably this decade, but you can see the start of this phenomenon at the end of the early 2000s, and that is Patek Philippe 5711. Nautilus Mania, now a watch that sells for double, triple, even quadruple retail in some instances, back then, my early career, we just kept them in the showcase. I mean, yeah, they sold relatively quickly, but we sold a lot more subs than 5711s. I sold more IWC Portuguese chronographs than 5711s. Hell, I sold more PAM 111s than 5711s. But by the end of it, we started hoarding them downstairs. The watch started to become super hot, and along with the Royal Oak, which I think is more next decade, I think the Royal Oak was always popular. These were always popular, but I think the Royal Oak exploded in value and prestige kind of this decade, where the 5711 started at the end of the early 2000s. Little too early to say what are the icons of the 2010s, but next year in 2020, I probably will make a video about that as well. But these are what I think are the standout, iconic, recognizable watches that influenced their eras, the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. As I said, this is 100% personal, nothing scientific about it. What do you guys remember from those eras? Do you kind of agree with me? Do you not agree with me? What are your iconic picks? Let me know in the comment section below. And also, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It really does help. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more content. Guys, thank you so much for sticking around for another episode of Federico Talks Watches, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.